Good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Tara Secreta Parker and I'm the president of the Citizens Association of Georgetown. On behalf of CAG and its board of directors, I want to welcome all of you to our February community program on Black Georgetown Remembered. Tonight, we will be hearing from one of the authors of Black Georgetown Remembered on the new introduction written as part of the 30th anniversary edition. We also have some amazing Georgetown neighbors who will share their reflections on their family's legacy and history in Georgetown. And we will learn about the role of Black churches and their history in Georgetown and get an update on the Female Union Band Society Cemetery and Mount Zion Church. It's going to be an exciting night. It is my honor to introduce my friend and my neighbor, Mr. Neville Waters III, our moderator tonight. Neville is a sixth generation Washingtonian who has been coming home to Georgetown for 65 years. Neville's grandfather bought their home on P Street in the 1920s, and it has remained in his family ever since. From playing sports in Rose Park as a child to his teen years, grabbing burgers at the Little Tavern, attending Sidwell Friends and Georgetown University for his MBA, Neville and his family have been an active part of our Georgetown community. Neville is currently president of the foundation that supports the Mount Zion's Female Union Band Society Cemetery, where he works to restore, maintain, and extend the legacy of the cemetery and contributions of Black people in Georgetown. Before I turn it over to Neville, I wanted just to note, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat function, and we hope to be able to answer some of those at the end of the evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Neville and welcome him, and he will introduce our distinguished panelists. Hi, Neville.
Hello, how are you, Tara? I'm like now really nervous because I have to live up to that hype, but we're going to persevere. I really appreciate the effort here. I'm excited and delighted to participate. And Tara, unbeknownst to you, I just briefly, you can't probably even see this, but it's the original deed from 1927. Today, February 9th, this is actually the anniversary of my grandparents buying this house. So, the spirits are definitely alive. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about me or giving you a whole lot of introduction, because I've really got some fabulous people with me tonight who all happen to be ladies. I'm always surrounded by wonderful ladies. Two of them actually happen to be young enough that I remember them running around in diapers. Their mothers were babysitters to me. So, it really is an example of some of the deep legacy that we have as Black people here in Georgetown. I think it's also very important that we are taking this time to discuss this matter and be open about it. I learned off many times from the same books that many white kids learn from. So it's not as if I had any particular extra knowledge, but the natural curiosity, obviously family stories, hopefully will bring some unique perspectives and insight, maybe touch on some things that are painful or sad, or some people have shame, guilt, embarrassment about that, and we work through that. I think that's what's so wonderful about dealing with the truth and facts and history. So anyway, I'm just going to briefly introduce the panelists, and I'm going to start a little conversation. But we have Kathleen Lesko here, who is one of the authors of the book Black Georgetown Remembered. The 30th anniversary edition is just being released. We're excited about that, and some of us on the panel tonight participated in it. So Kathleen and I will talk a little bit about her perspective. My neighbors on either side of me, by the way, they've been here almost as long as as our families, our grandparents were all friends, and they bought the houses together. But on one side, I have Jessica Davis Baugh, and she's going to have some great stories to tell and some memories. And on the other side of me, I have Monica Roche, whose family also is very close with mine. Also, a member of both the Mount Zion Church and the Mount Zion Female Union Band Society Cemetery Board. Dolores Green will be here, and she's got some really interesting things that they're working on specifically at the church to share. And then my very close friend, who also serves as the executive director for the foundation that oversees the cemetery, Lisa Fager, who has a great deal of passion about this subject, about the history, about being truthful, and generating awareness. As well as I know she'll want me to mention raising funds for just visit blackgeorgetown.com. Anyway, let me start by opening up actually and asking Kathleen Lesko sort of a brief opening question. The book Black Georgetown Remembered, when you first embarked on that, I believe with Valerie and Carol Gibbs, what was your motivation? How did you guys find the inspiration to want to undertake the subject?
Yes, can you hear me? I just unmuted myself.
I hear you.
Well, just to provide a context for the whole project, which included initially a documentary video that was then followed by a book on Black Georgetown Remembered. I just wanted to, first of all, just say a special thank you to CAG for hosting this special event tonight, and I'm very excited to be part of this program. I wanted to just start by saying, historically, the citizens associations of Georgetown were segregated, with the Black Georgetown Rock Creek Association formed in 1916 to improve the safety and property values of the neighborhood. It was particularly active from 1930 to 1960. Now, the documentary video and the book Black Georgetown Remembered sort of re-energized the Black Georgetown community to become more active in the whole Georgetown neighborhood. Neville, in the early 1990s, Neville's father, Neville Waters Jr., as he knows, became a vice president in the predominantly white Georgetown Citizens Association. This was a landmark event in the history of Black Georgetown. And
I recall very well.
You remember that? Yes.
Yes, yes.
And he was so instrumental in the initial project, getting everything off the ground and being one of our liaisons. Also, Monica and you, Neville, who are here tonight on this panel, and others, and regularly attend the CAG meetings to represent the Black perspective and to ensure your legacy, not only in the history of Black George, but in Washington, D.C., and really in American history, in general. The three editions, now I'll move to there were three editions of the book, Black Georgetown Remembered, which followed the documentary video, and they were all inspired by historic events in the context of social and racial justice. I should mention at the outset here that to have three editions of any book is quite a remarkable achievement in itself, and attests to the enduring relevance, I think, of the story of Black Georgetown. The first edition, published in 1991, was part of Georgetown University's bicentennial celebration in 1988-89. Valerie Babb and Carol Gibbs, my two co-authors, met each other, and then Val submitted a proposal to the Bicentennial Committee for a documentary video on the history of the Black Georgetown community. I was the special assistant to the director of the Bicentennial, and I was the director of program development. So I was assigned to this community outreach project, both the video and book, that resulted, of course, the video being premiered in 1989, and then the full-length book in 1991. I might share with you that I originally envisioned the book as a 50-page study guide to the video. But as everybody kind of came out of the woodwork with their memorabilia and photographs and documents, and we talked, I knew immediately, very soon, that I had a full-length book. And it was just such an exciting project to work with everybody in the community. I think it's interesting, too, that you know that the first title of the book was the forgotten Georgetown, since at that time, so much of America's Black history was still unknown and it was hidden, it was marginalized. But the title was changed, our committee changed the title to focus on the present memories of the Black Georgetowners that made their history visible and recognized in the community and part of the mainstream history of Georgetown. So the second edition, the 25th anniversary edition, was published in February of 2016. The year before, along with other American institutions of higher learning, Georgetown University began an ongoing process acknowledging and responding to its historical ties to the legacy of slavery in American society. And the history of Black Georgetown Remembered was part of that historic initiative. And I think that's what was the impetus for the second edition. Now we're at the third edition, which we're all excited about, and it's the 30th anniversary edition. And to me, it's evidence that the story of Black Georgetown is more relevant than ever. And that's what I always say when I sign the books now. I always say that it's more relevant. I think in the wake of George Floyd and the pandemic that has afflicted minority groups in America disproportionately, there has been a new call for social and racial justice. This heightened awareness has forced a new reckoning with the racial and ethnic discrimination of American history that we unfortunately know still exists today. So this third edition includes a new chapter in the form of a conversation with a dozen former and current Black Georgetowners that brings the book up to date. And I very much wanted to do the new chapter in this format so that the reader could really hear your voices, unfiltered by anything else, because this is your history. You know, these are the voices that we need to hear going forward. And I think our panel discussion tonight just continues that conversation. My hope is there'll be many more opportunities for everybody to hear your voices. I'm just going to end with a little puff that for the Georgetown University Press, you can use a discount code, and it's all in caps, it's TGUF, to save on purchases of this new edition, this 30th anniversary edition. We call it the third edition, made through the GU Press website. And you can also find a YouTube link to the companion documentary video on this website. And I know at the end of this program, that will be repeated, this information of how to purchase the new book using the discount code. And it's a 30% discount, which is very generous. So I hope it really promotes the book and encourages people to buy it and read it. And this conversation just keeps going on and on and on, and with all kinds of new experiences and opportunities and challenges. And I feel very proud and grateful to have been part of this project, Neville.
Well, no, that's great. And Kathleen, I can recall the initial work that you were doing and my father's participation, and you've always been committed to getting the story told. I'm sure that in the process there was stuff you learned.
Oh, absolutely.
Is there any one thing that you want to mention that you found particularly interesting or
Well, I think
amusing?
two things. Number one,
Yeah,
I
sure.
think that, I lived in Georgetown for over 30 years, and there really was no interaction between the Black Georgetown community and the other parts of Georgetown, which surprised me because I knew about the Black churches, but there really was no conversation. It was, so that was surprising to me. And so being able to meet your community, to meet everybody, Monica's mother and her aunt and your dad and everybody else, Jessica's uncle and aunt, I really just discovered my Georgetown family because I had come from a small village community in Kansas, and the anonymity I experienced in Georgetown really was a different way of living. And when I met all of you, I felt right at home, and that was a gift to me.
Well, great. No, that's great. Thank you, Kathleen. I want to try to keep things moving along because we want to save some time here for some questions, hopefully. I'm going to move to, she just mentioned Jessica Davis Baugh, who will share some of her legacy and memories. She has a particular connection through her family with the Mount Zion Church. But I want to hear what Jessica would like to share with you this evening.
Great. Thank you, Neville, my neighbor. And it's really an honor to be here tonight during Black History Month, during a time when history is being erased and facts are being contested. So I want to share with you tonight one story, a family history that represents many families who were here in Georgetown. The community that Kathleen mentioned that we are part of has changed, but we are still here. The Bowman family, my family, is featured in the book. This book, Black Georgetown Remembered. This is a photo of my great-grandparents, Carter Bowman Sr. and Eudora McDaniel. My great-grandmother, who I called Nana, was born in 1895 in Georgetown. Her father was Cleon McDaniel, born in Georgetown in 1864. His father was John McDaniel, born in Washington, D.C., we think in Georgetown, in 1830. We are proud Washingtonians. Our roots are in Georgetown, and they continue to deepen, and our family tree continues to bear fruit. Carter and Eudora Bowman had 6 children, 5 girls and 1 boy. They purchased the house in which I am sitting tonight, right next door to Neville, also in 1927. So we are at 2727 P Street, and they purchased it in 1927. And they raised all of their children in this home, our family home. My great-grandmother was a homemaker and took in laundry and sometimes cleaned houses in Georgetown. And my great-grandfather, Carter Bowman, was a civil servant who worked for the Bureau of Engraving for his entire career. And most of their children were teachers or civil servants. And I continue this tradition, representing the United States overseas as a Foreign Service officer. We have a long history of service here in my family, but really in Georgetown in general. This photo here is my grandmother, Doris Bowman, and she is sitting under a tree, actually in Rose Park. She and her siblings played in Rose Park, and there's a long tradition of organized and informal sports activities and social interactions, and it remains a gathering point. I played in Rose Park. My children play in Rose Park, and maybe next week when my sons actually come back to Washington, because when we come to Washington, we always come home to Georgetown, you'll see them playing basketball in Rose Park. My grandmother married Sylvester Haynes, who she met at Mount Zion United Methodist Church. His father was Reverend Haynes, pastor of Mount Zion in the 1940s. And this is just a little photo here. This is my grandparents' wedding here in Georgetown at 2727 P Street in the house. It was a wedding that brought 2 families together and was not celebrated in Mount Zion, but my parents were married in Mount Zion. The next photo that you'll see is of my great uncle, Carter Bowman Jr., the only boy in the family. And so he carried his football prowess that he developed in Rose Park to become the captain of the football team at then Tuskegee Institute. And after Tuskegee, he had a long career as a teacher and working in the schools in Washington, D.C. And he was also the historian and archivist at Mount Zion United Methodist Church and did so much to preserve the history and the memories of all of the parishioners and this really proud community in Georgetown, including at the community house, which is also featured in the book. The next photo that you'll see is of the Bowman family sitting in the living room at 2727 P Street, actually sitting right where I am talking to you from now. If my picture of that great uncle, if he stepped aside a little bit, you would see this exact lamp that's still sitting here. It's been sitting here my whole life. And this photo is of my beloved Aunt Connie, Constance Bowman Carter, the youngest of the 6 children. My grandmother, who I introduced you to, my great uncle, Carter Bowman, and my great aunt, Catherine Bowman, Aunt Catherine. Aunt Catherine is a proud Georgetowner, and they are sitting in this living room area. I showed you the picture of my grandparents getting married in this alcove. My great-grandparents celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in this alcove. It's a space of celebration and community. And the right above the alcove, right above where I'm sitting, is actually where my mom was born. And so this house is not only just a house, but it's really a representation of my family and of this community. The final photo that you'll see here is of Catherine Bowman, my aunt, who passed away 2 weeks ago at the age of 97. And she was the last member of her generation of Black Georgetown. And Aunt Catherine was sitting in this chair in which I'm sitting right now, a little bit of a different pattern here, but she always sat in this chair. And when I need to think or when I need to figure out anything, I come and sit in this chair and I close my eyes and I remember who we were and who we are. And the spirit of my ancestors are still here in this house because we are the living history of this community, Black Georgetown, and we are still here.
Jessica, I have to say that, a couple of things almost brought tears as well as a big smile to my face. And one is because you mentioned Rose Park, and, legend has it that my father saw my mother at Rose Park and she had a candy bar in the back pocket of her jeans. He happened to find her back pocket rather attractive and stole the chocolate bar, and that's how he met her. That was one story. But the fact that you mentioned about being born in the house, similar here. My father too was born and frankly died in the same room in this house, and it does an example of sort of that deep legacy and connection that we have. So no, that's awesome. I did get a note just to give a heads up that Monica was having some problems. I was
I'm
gonna.
in now.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Monica. I'm glad you spoke up because I want to. Now, this is my neighbor on the other side, and I want to hear about your perspective and memories, and share a little bit of your legacy.
Well, I am so excited to be here, Neville. You started out by talking about the spirits all around us, and I feel it. I feel it every time we open the book and read the book and have these type of discussions. To me, it's so important to talk about the African-American community that was once here and to erase some of the misconceptions of what that was. Even with the harsh reality of racism and segregation happening in DC, the African-American community in Georgetown was a thriving, hardworking, community-focused, and proud religious group of people. Black Georgetown was not just domestic workers. As the book shows, they were skilled laborers, business owners, lawyers, and physicians. Dr. Dotson and Dr. Marshall were esteemed physicians who served this community. At that time, churches, which is my focus today, were the foundation of the African-American community, not just for service and coming to worship, but for social events, book discussions, reading programs for African-American students, since they weren't allowed to go to the library. The churches led to the establishment of civic organizations. But unfortunately, the African-American Catholics in Georgetown did not receive that same welcoming, friendly atmosphere when they attended Trinity Catholic Church. When I look at my photo, the photo can be next. When I look at this photo, I sit up proud, I sit upright, looking at my great-great-grandparents, Moses and Elizabeth Booth, who were one of the original co-founders or original families that established Epiphany Catholic Church, along with the Dotson family, the Turners, Jackson, and Smackham families, just to name a few. So why was it so important for my great-grandparents to establish Epiphany? Well, let me tell you about this. African-American Catholics had attended Trinity Church for over 125 years, starting back in the 1790s. But unfortunately, they were faced with all kinds of racism and segregation, even though they're at one time made up a third of the church. They were not allowed to sit in the parish with other church members. They had to, when they were allowed in the church, they had to sit in a screened gallery on the side of the church. When the new church was built, they weren't allowed to attend service in the new church at first. They were forced to sit in the balcony. And my family would tell me stories being passed down of how they had to enter from a stairwell, a very dangerous stairwell on the back of the church outside, which was very difficult for older parishioners to even make it to the balcony to sit. African-American children weren't allowed to attend Sunday school or have opportunities to engage in fun activities or even the May procession. They couldn't come down and take communion until all the white parishioners were done. And when baptized, they were still being referenced as colored. Well, the African-American families had had enough, and they heard that the Archdiocese was now establishing new Catholic churches in DC for African Americans. So in 1923, these brave, strong African American families, including my great-grandparents, reached out to the Archdiocese and said, we need our own church. But no, they didn't come with, oh, what are you going to give us? They came with, we're ready. We have already started raising funds and we need your help. Luckily, the Archdiocese of Baltimore at that time, which was over DC, agreed to help organize their efforts and involve the Josephite priest or brothers to help with this establishment. One being Father Schaefer, who came along as the first priest of Epiphany, who helped purchase the 2 vacant lots at 2712 Dumbarton, where the church still stands. So when you look at these pictures, which are all photos that are actually in my home. So I live in my family house that was built, well, not built, but when my family bought in 1941. And these photos, my Aunt Cynthia Jackson actually had, which she contributed to the book, which you can see in the book, Black Georgetown to Remember. So in this photo, or the first photo that just passed, was actually the first choir at Epiphany. And then the next photo is the establishment of the bell. And then so the church, the establishment and getting the church to trying to establish or starting the church was in 1923, but the actual building and dedication of the church was in establishment of the church was actually in 1925. So you could see how crowded or how many actual African Americans were living here and attended the church. And that's when the church bell was dedicated. The next photo is the May procession. So this was a very popular event that everyone loved to participate in. So this is actually on the church stairs. And my mother, if you look at the second row and about the third student, far right, and the third young lady with the chubby cheeks, that is Martha Ann, my mother, which I, just warms my heart. She's no longer with us. Just warms my heart to see her in this photograph. And I am actually still a member of Epiphany Catholic Church. The next photo is just another picture of the May procession, right? That looks like 28th and P right there. And all the young students just look so nice in their beautiful outfits. The next picture. So even though it's unfortunate that Georgetown no longer has this thriving African-American community, but the former residents who still are, in my eyes, Georgetowners, come back when we have various events and anniversaries. And if you go to the next picture, that is our plaque that we had a big ceremony. In the next photo, you can actually see some of my family, some of current church parishioners and former church parishioners that came back for the dedication of that plaque for that ceremony. So we're still very proud, love to come back and tell our history And to just think in 1923, what that must have felt like to have, oh, how brave they were. I can't even imagine how it felt like, but how brave these African-American families were able to just stand up, fight for themselves, and get the church they deserved. And it's just such a wonderful story. Since that time, Holy Trinity has apologized for the treatment of African Americans that attended that church, and have had done a lot of research and history and programming to apologize for their actions.
You know, I was going to mention, Monica, I think.
One more photo now before we
okay.
end. You know,
But I was going to say, while you were talking about the Holy Trinity, I did want to say that they do deserve a shout out for their efforts around the whole anti-racism effort, and just acknowledging the history. You know, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry.
And I want to give Holy
yeah.
Trinity credit for, on their website, having so much of the rich history of Epiphany Catholic Church. That Epiphany, we have to work on getting that up on our own website. So I do greatly appreciate Trinity for continuing to tell the true story and history of what happened. And often, like you said, Neville, we can be uncomfortable talking about that. But I have to brag. I didn't want us to forget this picture and rush through. So this is my living room downstairs. Like Jessica talked about her chair, I'm upstairs now, but we still have these same chairs. If you knew my mother, that was her throne in the living room downstairs. She would sit and look out the window and catch all the action. But you have my grandfather, Edgar Jackson, my aunt Cynthia Jackson, my mother Martha, and me. And, you know, so proud. And so that's why it's so important we have these programs and have activities like this so we can continue to tell our story. And like Jessica and Neville both said, we are still here and we're not going anywhere. So thank you all. I'm so happy to share my story tonight.
Yeah, Monica, I have to say, I believe as I knew it, Mr. Ed and my grandfather used to hustle part-time up at the Cosmos Club, right? They used to do a little
years.
Yeah. And I have to tell this story. You know, they're both deceased, so I can tell on them now. But as I understood it, part of the benefit of working there was that at the end of the night, they would pour the quote good liquor into the mayonnaise jars and bring them home. And so they would have, you know, that as they say, the good scotch that they would be drinking after they had been serving the president or whatever. So yes. No, it's great. It's great. You know, we're doing pretty good here on time. I want to try to keep things moving so we can have some opportunity to answer some questions. This is really, it's a really great experience for me hearing all these stories, and in particular, Dolores Green here, who, as I said, sits on both the board of the Mount Zion Church as well as the Mount Zion Female Union Band Cemetery. And obviously she's very deeply engaged in the community. And Dolores, I know the church is working on some specific things around their history, and she's going to share a little bit of insight.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Dolores Green, and I've been serving as the historian of Mount Zion United Methodist Church for the past several years. We're located at 29th and Dumbarton Streets. Mount Zion is the oldest African-American congregation in the District of Columbia, and it has been, quote unquote, a resident of Georgetown for 205 years. Now, this evening, I'm going to really talk about the early beginnings of Mount Zion, the origins of this church. Our story begins with the quest for Black self-determination and freedom at the Montgomery Street Church, now known as Dumbarton United Methodist Church, in pre-Civil War Georgetown. Free and enslaved Black parishioners, along with white congregants, had been members of this church since its founding back in 1772. Black members, however, were treated as second-class Methodists. They were relegated to a crowded balcony during worship services and could not partake of the sacraments, that means just taking communion, until the white members had finished. Additionally, Methodist policies generally prohibited the ordination of Black preachers and didn't allow them to lead congregations. After enduring decades of discrimination, around 1812, some of the Black members began discussions with church leaders about forming their own congregation. After persuading the Methodist hierarchy, 125 free and enslaved Black members left the Montgomery Street Church and founded their own congregation in October of 1816. They built a brick church on 27th Street near Peace Street, and that's the cornerstone of that early church. And it was called the Meeting House and Little Ark. It was later renamed Mount Zion Methodist Episcopal Church. Despite the fact that Mount Zion was pastored by the Montgomery Street Church's white ministers, the Black Methodists were finally able to worship in their own church, and they worshiped with a sense of dignity. For them, Mount Zion was more than a church. It was a source of Black pride and activism, as well as the promise of self-determination and freedom. Now, these were really lofty ambitions considering the political environment in the nation's capital. The institution of slavery was preserved through the enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Acts, as well as numerous municipal laws known as the Black Code. These laws controlled the personal and public activities of free and enslaved Black people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For example, there were laws that dictated when Black people could bathe in local waterways, such as Rock Creek. Another regulation prohibited gatherings of free and enslaved Black people unless supervised by a white authority. One exception to the code, however, was that Black people were not prohibited from attending church on the Sabbath. The Mount Zion Methodists believed that this exception provided an opportunity to work toward the abolition of slavery and the achievement of varying degrees of Black self-determination. The institution of slavery not only shaped the political environment, but also served as one of the district's most profitable economic enterprises. In addition to factories and cottage industries along the Georgetown waterfront, it was populated with dealers who speculated in the slave trade. That is the buying and selling of men, women, and children. In fact, prior to the Civil War, the nation's capital had the most active slave depot in the nation. Now, this led to the constant presence of slave catchers. They not only pursued enslaved people who had run away, but they were also known to target free Black people. In addition to the hostile environment created by slavery, Mount Zion's free Black members had to contend with another threatening development within a couple of months of the church's founding. In December 1816, the American Colonization Society was organized in Washington with the purpose of resettling the nation's free Black people in Africa. A month later, Georgetown's free Black residents voiced their opposition to the society. Some Mount Zion members took a more forceful stand against Black immigration. After being identified for resettlement by the Methodist Church, which was an ardent supporter of the society, they resisted the call to immigrate and refused to go. They believed that since generations of Black people had helped build this nation, they had earned the right to remain here in the country of their birth. Mount Zion continued to seek freedom and determination for Black people. Some of the church's free members joined and served as leaders of national civil rights organizations that opposed the Colonization Society and worked for the abolition of slavery. These members traveled to Philadelphia, New York, and points north to protest with other activists, and their trips did not go unnoticed. Mount Zion members were warned and admonished on several occasions by the Montgomery Street Church for traveling to Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Philadelphia. Now known as Mother Bethel, it was considered a secessionist Methodist congregation, as well as the site of civil rights conventions. In fact, some Mount Zion members were suspended from serving as church officers for their association. Despite such retribution, their activism continued. Mount Zion members also worked in more subtle but personal ways to free people from bondage. Although they opposed the buying buying, selling, and enslavement of men, women, and children. They made a necessary accommodation with the dehumanizing system by purchasing themselves, family members, and others from enslavers. In fact, members held charitable benefits, worked multiple jobs, and traveled north to acquire funds for these purchases. Mount Zion was also involved in illegal covert operations to free enslaved people and became a station on the Underground Railroad. Enslaved fugitives were sometimes welcomed into the congregation and then disguised as members. Mount Zion men and women also assisted escapees by hiding them in the vault here on the old Methodist burying ground. Now it's known as Mount Zion Cemetery. Without such aid and assistance, many of these fugitives would not have made their way to freedom. Although ending slavery was an overarching and continuing concern of this congregation, Mount Zion members believed that educating Black people was also an important factor in the quest for self-determination. Unlike most Southern jurisdictions, the District of Columbia did not legally prohibit enslaved people from learning to read and write. In 1823, Mount Zion organized a Sabbath school that served both free and enslaved men, women, and children. Students were taught to read primarily from the Bible and elementary readers. Beginning in the 1840s, other schools were housed at Mount Zion. Additionally, members of this church opened their own private schools for Black children in Washington as early as the 1830s. Mount Zion members believed that acquiring even rudimentary literacy skills would benefit Georgetown's free and enslaved Black residents, especially since they were not working in agriculture, but laboring in urban occupations. Due to the continuing leadership and activism of church members, Mount Zion's impact and influence on the lives of Black people in antebellum Georgetown was considerable. By the 1840s, the congregation numbered around 550 people. Most of these members lived in Georgetown in close proximity of the church. This resulted in the development of a Black community of families, entrepreneurs, doctors, educators, government workers, laborers, domestics, and activists. For these residents, Mount Zion was more than a house of worship. It was the place where free and enslaved Black people could acquire an education, learn leadership skills, and develop self-reliance and confidence, qualities that proved beneficial in the quest for freedom and self-determination. Mount Zion was the spiritual, civic, and cultural foundation that allowed Georgetown's Black community to grow and make strides even in the antebellum era. It was the foundation of the community that we are remembering here today. Moreover, it is the foundation that has allowed Mount Zion to remain your neighbor here in Georgetown for more than 200 years. And I'd just like to say that Monica, Jessica, Neville, we are all descendants of generations of Mount Zion members. And I guess I'll have to put a plug in. I'm also an alumna of Georgetown University. So Georgetown, I guess, is in my blood.
Dolores, no, that's wonderful. And you know, I was going to say, and it continues to be a wonderful neighbor by providing childcare services, and I know have been maintaining that throughout the pandemic, and that's been awesome. But tell us, I know that right now you have a docudrama that the church is getting ready to produce, as well as a capital campaign. So tell a little bit about that.
Listen, I want to invite everybody to attend our virtual screening of the movie Celebrating Freedom, the Emancipation Journey of Mount Zion United Methodist Church. This is a dramatization of the Mount Zion story. It's going to premiere on March the 3rd at 7 p.m. And I ask you to please go to emancipationjourney.com to register. I'm going to repeat that again, one word, emancipationjourney.com. Also, I'm really very, very proud to announce that the National Fund for Sacred Places recently awarded Mount Zion a $100,000 matching grant for historic preservation. So in order for us to match this grant, we have launched the Mount Zion Historic Preservation Capital Campaign. Now, there are several ways that you can be a part of this effort, and it's primarily by making a donation. So you can go to our website, which is shown here, but that's in light yellow. So let me read that. mountzionumcdc.org/giving.aspx. But if you go to Mount Zion umdc.org, you'll get there for the different ways that you can give electronically. And also, don't forget, you can stop by the church and there you'll see a little mailbox there. You can drop your check in if you're in the neighborhood, or you can send us a check through snail mail. Mount Zion United Methodist Church, 1334 29th Street Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20,007. I want to thank Citizens Association of Georgetown for holding this event and for inviting Mount Zion to participate.
Oh, no, that's great. I thank you very much, Dolores. We're going to try to move things right along. And you know, I may even try to convince Tara to give us maybe a little extra 5 minutes on the back end because this is going so well. But anyway, I want to introduce someone who brings another interesting perspective. And I say that because she's not raised in Georgetown and doesn't have the same background and legacy that the other members who have spoken before have, but she has in the past, I would say 2-3 years, has really engrossed herself in the work of helping to restore and maintain the cemetery property that is the Mount Zion Female Union Band Society cemeteries. And so Lisa Fager is here to talk a little bit about what we are doing at the cemetery, some of the upcoming events. She might even also ask you for some money too. But Lisa, welcome this evening, and thank you very much. I think you want to start with a video. Is that
I did
correct?
want to start with my 90-second video.
Cemeteries are emerging all over the country, and we're finding out more and more about the significance and the lessons that cemeteries bring to the larger public. We have got to save this sacred area.
Was at one point in time, this property was a place where white members of a Methodist church were buried. The land was sold for the purposes to bury free blacks and slaves who resided in the area. Not only were black and white to live separately, but they were also to be buried separately. Over the years, unfortunately, it fell into disrepair. People died off, moved away, and it was under consideration to be sold to some developers.
The wholeness of a people is diminished if the ancestors are not honored.
Part of our ambition is to create a historic memorial park that recognizes the people who were here, provides inspiration for future generations, as well as educating about the rich history that Black people had in Georgetown.
So thank you, CAG, for allowing us to share and remember. And if you want to just put that up, everybody got to show pictures. I wanted to show some pictures too. A lot of times people see the cemeteries, and they are two cemeteries, with two histories. And so this is what it used to look like. And so sometimes when we're at the cemetery and maybe we're still struggling to mow the grass, and so it's a little long, people go, oh, poor cemetery. And I'm like, you just don't know what it used to look like. And this is what it used to look like. And the picture below with all the markers, I have no idea what happened to all those markers down at the bottom of that corner. I'm hoping they're under the ground where the federal government and the DC government have been digging. We will find out because we're going to get some ground penetrating radar done soon. You can go to the next slide. And this is in 1975 when we basically finally won from the developers originally had the right to disinter. I'm not going to go into the whole history of the cemeteries, but the developers had the right to disinter. But at that time, the man here on the right, Vince DeForest, was able to help with the help of Neville's father. They were able to get the cemeteries registered on the National Historic Registry. And in this picture, the judge had ordered us to reseed the property, which is how the markers got in those three piles. And this is some of the students from Western High School at that time helping. And next photo. And so people are talking about remembering. I just want to remember at least one person here and maybe correct some history. This is Clement Morgan. Clement Morgan was the first African-American to graduate with both an undergraduate degree and a law degree from Harvard University. You'll also, and he grew up in Georgetown. He was enslaved, him and his family, in Virginia. And once emancipation happened, they came over and lived in Georgetown. There's a marker in the cemetery, and so many times people thought that was that Clement Morgan. Actually, it is his father and his mother and his brother. He bought that. Obviously, it's a marble marker and it's beautiful. However, Clement, who achieved so much, also, he was a founder of the NAACP. He was the first Black alderman in Boston, Massachusetts. And Clement didn't have a grave marker until 2005 in Boston. So I think that's pretty amazing. And next slide. So here are some things I just wanted to highlight. And one of them, Patrick is going to kill me. Patrick is like my right hand, right? Patrick Tisdale, you probably see him in the cemetery. But this weekend is a date you should have. If you have muscle, we need you. We are going to take some of our equipment that we have that we clean markers with out of our vault so that we can allow people to visit and put it in a brand new shed, which we are building this weekend. So if you have muscle and are able to help, please come up to the cemetery at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Here are some dates. I know we're running out of time, so I don't want to take a lot, but some of these dates are some of the things that we have going on. I'm going to be doing tours on President's Day, 11 a.m., 12, and 1, if you'd like to come up. And then February 27th will be featured on the Discovery Plus channel and Science channel. It's their third episode about the Underground Railroad. And so the cemetery will be featured as well as C.R. Gibbs will talk about more broadly the Underground Railroad in Washington, D.C. And let's see anything else on here. Oh, yes, Emancipation Day. We are going to celebrate our premiere of our Immersive Voices of Zion that we have partnered with the Alliance of New Music Theater. And we're so excited about this. It'll be in the cemetery. We will walk to the churches. We're going to bring fellowship and a discussion. And we're also going to learn about some of the folks who actually lived in Black Georgetown and those who are interred in the cemetery. We also have history and headstones this summer. So just keep keep a lookout and for those dates. We would love volunteers, and we will definitely have more events. And yes, please donate. You could definitely go to blackgeorgetown.com. We want to thank Jack Evans, who was such a big supporter of the cemetery. We're struggling a bit this year. And so if you've read about it in the Washington Post, and we can talk about it later when you come for a tour, but we have halted all that digging, and I can tell you why the trail is closed. So I'm going to end there with the next slide. Yes, and so you can put up your phone. If you put your phone up to the code right there, it'll take you on a tour. And our very own volunteer, who is a junior in high school, Juliet Warga, created this walking tour. And so it's awesome, right? Because it's all over the cemetery, but you can also sit here at home and check it out as well.
No, thank you, Lisa. No, that's awesome. Lisa has been doing a tremendous work, as I said, generating awareness about the cemetery. We are hopeful that, as she said, that the trail has not caused any particular damage, and that the ground penetrating survey will help to provide some insight as to what's going on. Lisa, I did see a question which I found very fascinating, and I think you were well positioned to answer. Was the origin of the name the Female Union Band? I think people generally think that means women who were playing orchestra, but
yeah, think more like union, or like people are. Yeah, more like a union, a benevolent society. Women, the Female Union Band Society was established in 1832, and they bought the cemetery in 1842, when women, not just Black women, but women could not buy property. And it was Joseph Mason, speaking of schools at Mount Zion, who had a school at Mount Zion, that helped the women purchase the property. But these women weren't just women who attended Mount Zion. They attended a lot, I would say all the Black churches in Georgetown, Ebenezer, the Baptist church. And there was also Catholics like your grandmother, who was a member of the Female Union Band Society. So, and Native American women as well.
Yes, no, that's great. I think we have a few minutes left. There was I saw a slide. If you have available, I think it was a rather handsome family photo. Do you know the one do you know the one I'm talking about? Yes, that wonderful family there. That's my my mother and father sitting in the living room of the house that I still live in. And this next picture, Lisa always insists, she loves this picture. This is in front of 2729 P Street. That's my father, and yes, that's a Shetland pony. I believe that had to be, my father was born, I think, 1928. So, I mean, how old is he there? So it's a wonderful photo. And interestingly enough, I mean, the gate probably hasn't changed a bit. I know the stairs are still there. That picture makes me smile. So I appreciate Lisa making me share that picture this evening. Tara, I know that we are sort of bumped up against the time. You tell me, do you have any other questions? Do you want me to share the story of how we used to, those ginkgo balls? We used to call them stink balls when we were little kids, how we'd throw them at each other, and that was what we did for fun, or what?
Well, we always welcome any stories from you, Neville. I did see a question from Pamela Moore in the chat, and Gloria, perhaps she can, now we're on full screen, find that for us. And I don't know, Neville, if you saw Pam's question, but.
I did not see Pam's question, unless Pam's question was about the female union band.
Okay. Hers is right above, and she said she lives at 2725 Dunbarton, across from Epiphany Church, active member in CAG for years. In fact, she was a past president,
Ah,
past
awesome.
several times. Wonderful, beloved Pam Moore. She said, this is an outstanding program. This is history. What would you like to see Georgetown residents and others do going forward to have Black young people, along with being proud of their families, offered opportunities to make them successful? She said, does DC need better schools? But I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you this, and this is in some ways aspirational, but I'm going to share what my vision is. And in some ways, it sort of encompasses this program. The cemetery location, if you're not certain, it's basically 27th and Q, but sort of back off the road over there. There are 2 townhouses that happen to sit right around the corner there that I would envision becoming our archives, our Center for Black Culture, or Black Georgetown. Whatever the name Google gives me the money for, we'll call it that. But no, I mean, and that would be a place where there would be programming, there would be archives, histories, exhibits. It would really be the sort of the entry point for Georgetown, because from there, right next door, is the Dumbarton House. And there is a rich connection of history between the Dumbarton House, those who were enslaved, who had connections there. Continuing on through Georgetown, we reach Tudor Place, again, a place where there are connections with Dumbarton and the cemetery. And if we
Mount Vernon.
Yes, we keep continuing on, we have Georgetown University itself. So it really
City
is,
Tavern.
it is to me the vision of what the community, if there was something to support and get behind, knock on the politicians' doors, organize corporate sponsorships. But I think things like this, where we are able to talk about our histories, and share the memories, and really sort of appreciate the contributions that have helped to make Georgetown such a unique community. That would be my ask.
Neville, can I add one thing to that? Do we have time?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. I think one thing that's very important is that DC history needs to continue to be included in the curriculum in DC public schools. And I know when I was at Wilson, there was some DC history, but never did we study Georgetown and the significance of the community and the rich community. I was just texting someone had just was talking about how they're enjoying this program. And it wasn't that long ago when this side of P Street was growing up, I would say at least 60% African-American. And so this is in the 80s. And so, we would go up and down hop from Beverly's house to the Wharton house and, just up and down the street, the Dotsons. And so it's not like we're talking 40, 50, 60 years ago that, and for various reasons. In my political work that I do here in the city, I always talk about there's no incentives to help families like ours stay in these homes because of the extremely high taxes we pay, as if we just bought our homes. And that's another issue which I often, bring up in different forums, political forums, that if you want people to be able to stay in, the city, there's got to be ways that I'm not 65, but this is my family home that I want to hold on to. So I don't get the tax breaks, things like that. So that's just my 2 plugs I wanted to bring in.
No, you're more than welcome. I think you've earned that to be able to share your perspective as well. Um, did anyone else have any other closing remarks or anything else that they needed to share? Did we have any other questions that before we close this out?
I just wanted to say too that I mean it's not just about DC history. I think it's about American history. And there's, you know, as the nation's capital, there's you know, the city has changed a lot. And you know, some people think it's a wonderful change, and yet others, I think, like, you know, the families who are on this screen, there's, you know, you accept change, but it's not necessarily wonderful for everyone. Certainly all of the Georgetown residents who would have, I think, very much liked to stay here in the neighborhood who couldn't afford to, you know, that change is not necessarily a welcome change. And it's not about guilt or anything. I mean, it's really about a celebration of the community that still exists, by honoring that memory and by honoring what they've built. I mean, I think Kathleen talked about the embrace that she felt. It's still an embrace that's very much who Georgetown is. But who Georgetown is in 2022 is a different Georgetown. And we need to honor the Georgetown of today by also honoring, you know, the ancestors that made this Georgetown possible, and that, you know, we can't forget. And so
Yeah,
I would
no,
just say, we
yeah.
can't forget.
I
And
think
I'd
that's
like to,
awesome. And you know,
I
I
was
was going
going
to say,
to,
excuse me, I'll just say one other thing, and because Georgetown is very much built on the foundation of preservation. As anybody who lives in Georgetown knows, you better not mess with the front of your house. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Lisa.
I think somebody had asked about volunteering or doing pro bono matters at the cemetery. We take, yes. If you go onto the website, there's a volunteer form and it goes to Patrick and I, and one of us will respond. So, and if we haven't responded, forgive us. I had COVID, sorry.
Anyway, no, thank you. And let me just say one other thing, echoing I think some of the other sentiments, and something that Lisa has found in working with some of the kids through the programs we have, is that understanding the history. You know, Washington, for what it's worth, the Emancipation Day here recognizes what happened here in Washington, which predated the Emancipation Proclamation. The enslaved people here were freed in 1862. Am I correct, Lisa? And so,
Yes.
you know, that day is more than just a day off in April. It really is a very meaningful day. And I would say it's wonderful that Juneteenth is being recognized, but Juneteenth really has no real relevance to the legacy of slavery here in this market. And that's a whole nother subject, because one of the things that I think is important to understand too is that slavery was a horrible institution, but it was different in different places. And certainly in an urban area like Washington and Georgetown, it was different. There was a lot of examples that Lisa has uncovered in her research of families owning each other in order to be together and protect and keep the unit together. So it's about the facts and being truthful. And so I really appreciate all of you. It's been a wonderful evening. And thank you, Tara, for providing the forum and the platform. And you know, anytime you ask, you know, I know I'll be there for you. So it's
Thank you.
been
I'll
wonderful.
take you up on it. Thank you, Neville. Thank you, Jessica, Dolores, Monica, Lisa, and Kathleen, on behalf of the Citizens Association of Georgetown. We're so grateful for you and the sharing of your memories and your family legacies and the history of Black Georgetown. I think the spirits of your ancestors are definitely with us tonight. And as Jessica noted, Black Georgetown is a living history, and we're honored to celebrate it tonight, and we're called to keep remembering it. So with that, go online to the Georgetown Press website and purchase Black Georgetown Remembered for 30% off, and you can use the code TGUF. And with that, we thank you all in the spirit of also Valentine's Day weekend. Love your neighbors. Be kind to one another. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.